In 2004, a group of 8 economists, including 4 Nobel laureates, set out to prioritize the world's problems, an ambitious task to say the least. The group was called the Copenhagen Consensus, and their conclusion basically was, don't waste valuable resources trying to prevent global warming. Focus instead on things like preventing AIDS, alleviating global hunger, and eliminating trade barriers. We're joined today by the organizer of that conference, the self-described skeptical environmentalist, Bjorn, author of this book, How to Spend $50 Billion to Make the World a Better Place. Bjorn, thanks for coming on.
Well, thanks for having me here.
So, a lot of the criticism that you have occasioned has been related to the issue of global warming. So let's first deal with that. People look around the world and they see climate's getting more extreme, hurricanes increasing, people say the polar ice cap is melting. There does seem to be lots of evidence that global warming is happening, right?
Absolutely, and we're not at all disputing that fact. We got to get into all the niceties of what is actually increasing, but definitely global warming is happening. But the question we ask at the Copenhagen Consensus is not how big are the problems, but how much can we do about them? Essentially, the biggest problem in the world is probably we all die. But since we can't really do something about it, we should focus on some things that we can do something about. We can do something about HIV/AIDS. We can do something about malaria, malnutrition, free trade, easily, cheaply, and do a lot of good.
Wait, but so what it sounds like at some level then is that you're saying you have an air of fatalism about it, that if global warming is happening, it's such a huge problem, and stopping would be so immensely costly that it's not worth doing. But what if it ends life on the planet as we know it?
Oh, absolutely. Then you'd be willing to spend a lot more. But really, global warming is one of the many problems. What we are saying is 2 things. First of all, it's not actually going to destroy all life on Earth. It will be a problem.
So let's stop at that, yes. Because lots of scientists say that if unchecked, it will actually have a very, very extreme effect on human life and change. Places that, like Manhattan, will be underwater. You've seen the Al Gore movie, I assume.
I've seen the preview. Yeah.
What do you say to those people who say, look, all the other stuff will be irrelevant if global warming takes place?
Yeah, and that's just simply hype. I mean, when Britain's chief scientist, Sir David King, says that we'll only be able in 2100 to live in an ice-free Antarctica because everywhere else is going to be too hot, that's just simply not in the science. If you read the UN Climate Panel reports, it will get worse. Some places it'll get better, like where I'm from in Denmark, but most places in the third world it will get worse. But it will not be devastating in any way. You will not see New York inundated. The medium expectations
explain that, because people like Gore say that the bulk of scientists believe that places like New York will be underwater.
Yeah, and that's just simply wrong, and that's not what the UN Climate Panel, the esteemed body of 2,000 or more scientists that come together and actually try to describe global warming, is telling us. They say somewhere between 30 and 50 centimeters of water increase, which would be a foot to 2 feet of water increase over the next century. And you got to remember, last century, water actually increased somewhere between 10 and 25 centimeters. So we've already experienced that, and we didn't have big problems. I'm not saying it's not going to be a problem, but I'm saying we got to look at how big a problem is it. It's not devastation, it's a problem. And the second part, the one that you sort of broke me off in saying, is first of all, it's not going to devastate human life. The second part is you also got to ask, how much change can you do? How much can you actually affect this? And the answer is, even if we implement Kyoto, as we've talked about, that is cutting carbon emission about 30% for developed countries, even if the US participated into this, even if all of these countries stuck with the agreement all the way through to 2100, it would do very little good. It would basically postpone global warming for about 6 years in 2100. Everybody agrees about this. So this is also what the science tells us. Yet the cost would be about $150 billion a year, every year for the rest of the century. So the question I really ask is, do we want to spend a large amount of money, $150 billion every year for the rest of the century, to do very little good 100 years from now? When the UN estimates that for half that amount, for about $75 billion a year, we could solve all major basic problems in the world. We could give clean drinking water, sanitation, basic healthcare, and education to every single human being on the planet.